Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. No intro needed. Epic History TV. We are going to learn about 1848. Revolutions. Original link, top, description, Discord, everything. Always where it is. Let's learn. Phones away.
1848. More than 3 decades after his defeat, the shadow of Napoleon Bonaparte and the French Revolution still looms over Europe. The peace settlement of 1815 had been a triumph for reactionary forces. Europe's great powers, Britain, France, Austria, Prussia,
Whatever.
and Europe's great powers, Britain, France, Austria, Prussia, and Russia, were committed to working together to ensure no more revolutions. Radicalism and republicanism would not be allowed to disturb.
Sorry. Every time I look at this picture, I'm like, these 4 guys just crack me up. It's like, this guy's the psycho, full blown, he's into it. This guy over on the left is like, oh, I can't, I'm not, no, I don't want to. This guy is like, no, you got to see, look at this. And then this guy is like, I'm going to puke, I can't see.
The peace of Europe again. Austrian Chancellor Prince Clemens von Metternich is regarded as the architect of this new conservative order.
I always forget
Some
he's
historians
not
call
Prussian.
it the Metternich system. And yet, across Europe, there are many for whom the ideals of the French Revolution remain not a nightmare, but an inspiration. Liberals seek personal freedoms and civil rights, such as equality before the law, protected by constitutions, a free press, and regular elections. Nationalists share these aims with a desire in Italy and Germany for national unification, or in the multi-ethnic Austrian Empire for greater recognition, autonomy, and respect for language. Poles continue to seek the restoration of an independent Poland, and have.
It's interesting how it's still called the Kingdom of Poland, and yet after the Napoleonic Wars. So Poland is still sort of its own thing. It's just you had to give Russia something. And it's interesting how Krakow is in...
have launched one bloody uprising against the Russians in 1830. Their cause is supported by liberals across Europe. In most countries, liberals and nationalists face draconian censorship laws, arrest by the secret police, and bans on political parties and meetings. But there are always loopholes. In France, private banquets turn into political rallies. In Italy, scientific societies discuss politics, while gymnastic groups do the same in Germany. These liberal movements are dominated by the middle class, with their own local and national agendas, but also many shared values and aims. They are passionate, organized, and waiting for their opportunity.
I believe that right now we are sleeping on a volcano. Can you not sense that the earth is trembling again in Europe? Can you not feel the wind of revolution in the air? Tocqueville, French politician.
But it isn't just the middle classes that want change. By 1848, rising populations and food prices had created hunger, poverty, and social unrest across Europe. Low wages and hunger drive peasants to cities in increasing numbers, where they become cheap labor to feed the growing pace of industrialization. They live in slums and work long hours in dreadful conditions, if they can find work. Violent protests by workers and peasants are on the rise. Harvest failures and potato blight make a bad situation worse, with a deadly famine in Ireland and food riots across France.
I really want to learn about like all of these like area names that you hear, like Bohemia and Silesia, Galatia, Bavaria, I know, or like I'd really like to know. I want to get to the point where I know those words enough, those names, to where I don't have to ask questions like this. And I want to learn about them, like all the little, like sub area. You know what I mean.
In the face of such crises, Europe's governments offer little support or hope of reform. When French Prime Minister François Guizot is challenged that only the richest half% could vote in France, he merely replies, "Enrichissez-vous, get rich." In the winter of 18...
Get rich. Just get rich. Idiot. Like, come on. That's the answer to all your problems. I don't think he's going to be very well liked.
Enrichissez-vous, get rich. In the winter of 1847-48, a sharp economic downturn throws thousands more out of work. The case for reform is more urgent than ever, but Europe's governments fail to act. The stage is set for a European revolution. This video is sponsored by...
Guys, we're able to watch these amazing videos, at least if you're watching this with me. Use their Epic History TV 05221. Just go to their link. It helps them out. Least we can do here.
Skillshare, the online community with thousands of classes for everyone who loves learning. Skillshare is the perfect place to hone your creative skills across a huge range of topics, including video editing, animation, and creative writing. In fact, you could learn all the skills you need to be a great video maker right here on Skillshare, with entry-level classes for all the tools we use to make an Epic History TV video, such as Adobe Premiere, to more advanced classes that we follow ourselves, such as Jake Bartlett's Animating with Ease in Adobe After Effects, because you're never too old to learn new tricks. The first 1,000 viewers to sign up using the link in our video description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, so you can start exploring your creativity today. Thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video.
Did I make it? Oh, that was just in time. No state in Europe is in worse condition than ours. In the country which is said to be the Garden of Europe, the people die of hunger and live worse than beasts. The only law is caprice. Caprice? 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 Luigi Settembrini Napoletane Liberale.
In southern Italy, the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies is ruled by Spanish Bourbon King Ferdinand II. His disastrous agrarian reforms have united Sicilian landowners.
Guys, I always wanted to learn about how this area was ruled. That's a topic for another time.
His disastrous agrarian reforms have united Sicilian landowners and peasants against him. His kingdom will witness 1848's first revolution. In Sicily, furious crowds chase Bourbon troops out of Palermo, and the island declares independence, readopting its liberal constitution of 1812.
Yep.
Revolutionary fervor spreads to the mainland. Mass rallies in Naples force King Ferdinand to issue his own constitution. In Piedmont, Sardinia, the threat of revolution persuades King Carlo Alberto to grant a constitution, and there are celebrations in the streets of Turin. Across the border in Austrian-ruled Lombardy, Venetia, Italian nationalists revolt in Milan and Venice, and drive out the Austrian garrisons. But as dramatic as these events are, they're about to be eclipsed by news from Paris.
When France sneezes, Europe catches a cold. Metternich. Who's the Prussian guy I'm thinking of? Metternich. I think it also starts with an M.
Since France's 1830 July Revolution, the country has been ruled by Louis Philippe, the so-called Citizen King. He's a more moderate figure than his Bourbon predecessor, Charles X, but he opposes further reform, despite the growing economic crisis. His Prime Minister, François Guizot, is hated when he bans the
I wonder why. What could he have said that...
banquets that are really opposition rallies. Angry crowds march through Paris.
What?
His Prime Minister, François Guizot, is hated when he bans the banquets that are really opposition rallies. Angry crowds march through Paris, chanting, "Down with Guizot, long live reform." Guizot resigns, but it is not enough. Nervous troops fire on the crowds. 52 civilians are killed. Louis-Philippe loses control of the capital, and as the mob advances on the Tuileries Palace, he abdicates and flees to England. A new
Everyone flees to England.
provisional government is formed, and from the Hôtel de Ville, new Foreign Minister Alphonse de Lamartine announces, "The Republic has been proclaimed." France's monarchy has fallen in just 3 days. The news is carried across Europe by the new telegraph system. The effect is
How cool is that, guys? Like, imagine all the really big inventions. Like, we lived with one. Like, the internet has got to be up there, right? I wouldn't even consider putting the phone as high as something like the internet or the telegraph or the printing press. But like, it's one of those. Imagine like before the printing press was a thing, and then like a printing press became a thing, and like you show like your grandfather who never knew any, and he's like, what? How does someone write this so fast or something like that? Like, but imagine this. This must have been insane. For the first time ever, like you can instant communicate pretty much, or instant to someone on another side. And so it must have been such a, like, we all tend to think like we're in the future or like we're in the present, but we're in the present, but we feel like you know what I mean? And so that must have been such a crazy new technology.
electrifying.
We're in the present, but the future, we feel like the future. Tell the people that I agree to everything. Ferdinand.
75-year-old Austrian Chancellor Prince Metternich is among the first to be informed of the revolution in Paris. His police chief assures him there's no chance of such a thing happening in Vienna. But on the 13th of March, around 4,000 students, inspired by the news from Paris, march on the Landhaus, the assembly building, and force their way in.
Look how nice it is. I don't know why. I just always thought that the Austro-Hungarian Empire was sort of like a second, like this looks like it could be in London or Paris or Berlin or something. I mean, it is Vienna. I just always kind of pictured the Austrian Empire as like between the Russian and French in terms of like civility. I just forget what I said.
A confrontation with troops who opened fire and killed
that was
4.
dumb.
Vienna,
what I just said was it was stupid. Forget that. Never mind.
Workers side with the students. Much of the crowd's hostility is directed at Metternich. When the state council suggests he resign, Metternich meekly agrees and heads into exile in England. One of the most extraordinary political careers in Europe's history, spanning 40 years, comes to an end.
I'm pausing a lot in the past, but there's just so much stuff. I am so jealous of people hundreds of years from now who are going to be able to read about historical figures from hundreds of years in the past and then get to see video in color of those people. But like I'm thankful that we at least have like some in the 1800s photos or with no. I mean, you could colorize this, but I wish we could see like a video as good as video today of like Julius Caesar or Hannibal or Alexander the Great or take your pick, Constantine, Napoleon. And I'm so, okay, no more pausing.
Emperor Ferdinand suffers from epilepsy and a speech impediment, and is a largely passive figure. But when his council announces there will be elections for an assembly that will draft a constitution, crowds cheer him in the street. The secret police disappear. Censorship is ignored. The people of Vienna celebrate. Nationalists within the Austrian Empire are also inspired by events. In the Hungarian parliament, politician Lajos Kossuth makes a fiery speech denouncing Habsburg absolutism as the pestilential air which dulls our nerves and paralyzes our spirit. His speech is printed and circulated widely, inspiring others across the empire. Hungarians launch their own revolution, with 12 demands that include greater autonomy, a free press, and parliamentary reform. Czech liberals in Prague form a national committee and also send their demands to Vienna. There is even a Romanian nationalist uprising in the Ottoman province of Wallachia, forcing the abdication of the local prince.
We were dominated by a vague feeling as if a great outbreak of elemental forces had begun, as if an earthquake was coming of which we had felt the first shock. Carl Schurz, German student. Hey, the German, yellow, red, black.
Across the smaller states of Germany, rulers face popular demands for reform.
Otto?
Most quickly grant concessions to avoid losing their thrones. The black, red and gold tricolour, symbol of a united Germany, is prominent among the crowds.
I wonder what those
Germany's
colors
first
symbolize.
ever National Assembly meets in Frankfurt, with elected delegates from across Germany. They debate how they will achieve the liberal dream of a unified Germany and begin drafting its national constitution. In the Prussian capital, Berlin, students and liberals are thrilled by developments and celebrate Metternich's fall. King Frederick William IV promises reform, but also moves extra troops into the city. Tensions escalate between Berliners and soldiers.
Ah, great. Yes, everyone, let's be happy. He's down, but I'm also going to move in a bunch of troops so you don't do the same thing to me.
And on the 18th of March, protesters erect
Did I just say gibberish? It was just funny how he...
barricades. The army attacks, leading to vicious fighting in the streets. 800 protesters are killed.
Jesus.
The king loses his stomach for the slaughter and withdraws troops from the city, promising a new constitution.
Saddle your horses, gentlemen. A republic has been declared in France. Nicholas of Russia. He's kind of growing on
Not
me.
all Europe is embracing change.
Or the other guy.
In Russia, Emperor Nicholas firmly opposes any reforms. He'd been badly shaken by the Decembrist revolt on the opening day of his reign.
See, guys, look at this. It's like, look at this. So it's like a sandwich. So you have Russia here, you have Austria, France, Prussia here, and then you have Britain here. And it's like, I feel like the reason the 1848 revolutions have the most impact here, rather than in the buns of the sandwich, rather than Russia and Great Britain, is that Great Britain, I feel like, was a bit more progressive already by then standards, and so the reaction wasn't as fierce. Russia was so the opposite that it's like, go ahead and try, I will murder you. And then in the middle, it's like, they aren't as far ahead progressively in a lot of social stuff as Great Britain, and there are more ahead than in Russia, and so they're like the perfect ingredients for an explosive revolution. Does that make sense?
Russia, Emperor Nicholas firmly opposes any reforms. He'd been badly shaken by the Decembrist revolt on the opening day of his reign.
That was a great video. I'd watch that.
Since then, he has
Epic
tightened
History
censorship
TV.
and created a new secret police unit, the Third Department. There is a crackdown on all suspected subversives. Writer Fyodor Dostoevsky is among those arrested and subjected to a mock execution. before he is exiled to Siberia. There will be no concessions in Russia. By European standards, Britain is already a liberal constitutional monarchy.
What is the other, I think it was a History Matters video where it was, why wasn't Great Britain as affected by the 48 revolutions as others? And I got it totally right, guys. Come on, I rarely get things right, and I got that right. Give me it.
And the middle classes broadly accept the status quo. But there is a popular movement calling for more democratic reforms. They're known as the Chartists, for the 6-point charter they wish to implement. A mass rally is organised for the 10th of April in London. This is a photograph of that meeting. The authorities fear violence and draft in 80,000 extra police. But the event passes off peacefully. In the Netherlands, King William II backs a new constitution and reforms, successfully preempting any revolutionary disturbance. With fortuitous timing, Frederick VII of Denmark had abolished royal absolutism in January, so also avoids revolution. But he faces a German nationalist revolt in Schleswig-Holstein.
Otto incoming.
Which leads to war with the German Confederation. Denmark will ultimately prevail in this war, thanks to diplomatic support from the other European powers.
That's a great painting. I really like that.
In 1848, Polish hopes were high that these revolutions would pave the way for the restoration of an independent Poland. Europe's liberals, after all, had frequently expressed enthusiasm for the idea. But in reality, no major power is willing to risk confrontation with Russia for the sake of the Poles. A Polish right...
I feel like most people, or what I've learned, are mostly afraid of Russia, not because they're just like this amazing, coherent, smart military leadership, but because they're so unpredictable, and they'll just throw a bunch of people at you at like the most unforeseen moment. I paused too much. They're just like, they seem like they're scary because they're not organized very well. I could be completely wrong, guys. I'm trying to learn. Let me know if I'm wrong.
Rising in Posen is put down by the Prussians, while the Austrians deal with risings in Krakow and Galicia.
The February Revolution was like a sacred promise of emancipation for all the peoples of Europe. Mark Cossadier.
The first euphoric phase of the European revolutions becomes known as the springtime of the peoples. With censorship relaxed, there's an explosion in the number of newspapers. Among them, Cologne's radical new daily, Neue Rheinische Zeitung, edited...
Guys, I like to make jokes about Karl Marx. I think with the time he was living in, it was much more... All right, I'm sorry. I know it gets annoying, the joke of like, oh, communism, Karl Marx, evil. I like to learn, and that includes learning about these too, if I must.
Cologne's radical new daily, Neue Rheinische Zeitung, edited by Karl Marx. It feels like the dawn of a new era. But these early successes are built on the back of an uneasy alliance, as Marx is quick to highlight. Middle-class liberals want constitutions, more inclusion in politics, and a free press. Workers, who are the revolutionary foot soldiers in many cities, want cheaper food and the right to work. German radicals sum it up with a neat pun: freedom to read versus freedom to feed. Europe's new...
Wow, I can't believe they actually... Presserfied. It's funny how it actually rhymes both in German and English, because often words that rhyme in one language doesn't mean when they're translated they're going to rhyme also, but that it does.
Europe's new assemblies are under pressure, from conservatives who think they're going too far, and radicals and socialists who think they're not going far enough. Most horrifying of all to Europe's middle class, there hovers the threat of mass, direct action, social revolution, the mob.
Bread or lead, bread or lead. Paris workers cry.
In the wake of the revolution, France's provisional government had set up national workshops, a public works program to alleviate unemployment in Paris. But just 3 months later, a new, more conservative government announces their closure. 100,000 workers are suddenly jobless. The response is immediate and furious. Over 3 days in June, Paris radicals take on the middle-class National Guard and regular troops in a bloody battle of the barricades. The Archbishop of Paris attempts to mediate, but is cut down in a crossfire. This remarkable early photograph shows
That's crazy. So
Archbishop of Paris.
So that's like the Archbishop of Canterbury, but the French version. Why isn't it called the Archbishop of London, by the way? So that's like the church guy of the Catholic Church in the country. So that's a pretty big figure and a religious figure. And knowing that him trying to like calm tensions and then get shot, that shows you just how freaking crazy stuff was at this time.
Attempts to mediate, but is cut down in a crossfire. This remarkable early photograph shows some of the Paris barricades fought over that summer. By the time it's all over, General Cavaignac's troops have killed at least 1,500 workers and arrest 12,000 more, a third of whom are deported to Algeria. He believes he has saved France from anarchy. The sacred cause of the Republic has triumphed, he declares. The French Revolution has split between left and right, with bloody consequences. It paves the way for the return of a famous name from the past, promising unity and order.
3 days of blood will give us 30 years of peace. Sorry, did you hear that? 3 days of blood will give us 30 years of peace. Joseph Radetzky von Radetz. Radetzky von Radetz. Austrian Field Marshal. Is he good?
That spring, conservative governments had been caught off guard by the speed of events. Now they begin to fight back. In Prague, Czech students clash with troops. The wife of Austrian commander General Windisch-Graetz is killed by a stray bullet. He responds by withdrawing his troops and bombarding the city's old town with artillery. 43 are killed before the students surrender. In Italy, King Carlo Alberto of Piedmont, Sardinia, has declared an Italian war of liberation against Austria and invades Lombardy, Venetia. He is supported by the other Italian states and nationalist volunteers, including the Italian Legion, led by professional revolutionary
That's
Giuseppe.
one of the guys that's one of the guys in the Discord quiz you put up that I didn't know the face of.
Garibaldi. Austrian forces in Italy are commanded by 81-year-old Field Marshal Radetzky, a distinguished...
What's with all the Radetskys? Radetzky. I guess I've only seen two.
Are commanded by 81-year-old Field Marshal Radetzky,
Hey, horsey.
a distinguished veteran of the Napoleonic Wars.
Even the horse has a nice...
Vienna.
I have such bad ADD. I'm sorry. I was looking at the horse's hair. What did they say about him?
In Italy are commanded by 81-year-old Field Marshal Radetzky, a distinguished veteran of the Napoleonic Wars.
81.
Vienna
Okay.
orders him to negotiate. Instead, Radetzky wages a masterful campaign, fending off the Piedmontese advance, then launching a decisive counterattack. Piedmontese forces retreat in disarray, and Carlo Alberto negotiates a truce. That summer, Johann Strauss composes the Radetzky March to celebrate the old general's victory. Meanwhile, Austrian relations with Hungary are in crisis. The country is now effectively independent, with its own elected parliament and a prime minister, Lajos Batthyány. But not everyone wants to be part.
This is where some of the letters start to get strange. Like there seems to be, the Balkans seem to be like you got, Turkish language, and then right below that you got like Arabic and Hebrew, which Hebrew is insanely weird, strange looking. You got Greek, which is strange looking, the Cyrillic Russian, and then all of these are like a mix, and it's cool to see like how like this is like a melting pot of a bunch of different alphabets. Or I'm just wrong and I just said something that's false.
Part of the new Hungary. Savage ethnic conflicts break out between Hungarians and Romanians in Transylvania and Hungarians and Serbs in Vojvodina, leaving thousands dead. An even greater threat is Croatian General Josip Jelačić, a fire-breathing imperial loyalist who takes matters into his own hands and invades what he regards as a renegade province.
He looks pretty cool, though. That is a pretty cool painting. The Austrian uniforms, by far, are my favorite in this time period. Early 1800s, Napoleonic Wars. Just the colors, and they just look so fresh and amazing.
The Emperor still hopes for a peaceful resolution and sends a loyal general, Count Lamberg, to take command of Hungarian military forces. But on arrival, he's brutally murdered by a mob. Appalled, the imperial government declares war on the Hungarian revolutionaries. This, in turn,
I want to say something, but I want to wait to the end because I would spend like 5 minutes talking about it. But if I don't, then I want to say something to do with the switch in the atmosphere of upper classes and monarchies, but just upper classes all around Europe, being used to centuries to this sort of aura of respect and untouchableness. And it seems like finally they're getting smacked in the face with like the truth of like, look, you go out here, you're just going to get stabbed. I'd like to talk a lot more about that. And I think that's a lot about the revolutionaries, the 1848 revolutions, is that it seems like a lot of monarchs, maybe coping, believed that it was just the Napoleonic Wars. This is what happens. This was just a one-off, big uprising, and we defeated Napoleon. But it seems like now is the wake-up call of like, no, this is a giant feeling around people who don't like the class system. And anyways, I could go on forever, but I think that's fascinating.
Appalled, the imperial government declares war on the Hungarian revolutionaries. This, in turn, outrages liberals and radicals in Vienna. There is fresh violence on the streets, and the Austrian Minister of War is lynched. Troops evacuate the city, while the Emperor flees to Olmütz. Jelačić marches to the government's aid. He joins forces with Windisch Graetz outside Vienna, and together they bombard the city. Then they attack. The October Rising is crushed, with the loss of 2,000 lives. 25 revolutionary leaders are executed, including Robert Blum, a member of the German parliament in Frankfurt. He becomes a celebrated martyr of the revolutions. With Vienna secure, the Austrian invasion of Hungary can begin. The Hungarians are heavily outnumbered. Budapest falls, and the Hungarian government evacuates to Debrecen.
We now have 40,000 men in and around Berlin. Order in Berlin, and we shall have order in the country. Head with Moltke. That's the guy I was thinking of. That's the name. So Moltke. Major Helmut von Moltke. I'm not saying that he's a similar figure to Metternich. It's just the names got confused.
Following the violence in Berlin that March, the King of Prussia withdraws to his palace at Potsdam, on the outskirts of the city. Here he is surrounded by loyal troops and conservative advisors, including a 33-year-old aristocrat named Otto von Bismarck.
Boy.
When asked for his
He looks just like Ulysses S. Grant.
view on what should be done, Bismarck says nothing, but leans over to a piano and taps out the March of the Prussian Infantry. The forces of conservatism are strong in Prussia. There is deep loyalty to the state and the king. Allies, like Bismarck, adopt the enemy's tactics, launching conservative political organizations and newspapers to mobilize this support.
Verein für König und Vaterland. Neue Prebusche-Zeitung. I butchered that, I'm sure.
By November, King Frederick William has noted the infighting of his opponents and the defeat of the Vienna Revolution, and decides to act. He orders General Wrangel to lead 13,000 troops into Berlin. They enter the city unopposed and order the Prussian assembly to disperse. It has no option but to comply. Prussia will get its constitution, but it is one handed down by the king, under which he retains full executive power.
Berassen Sekunde Ferdin. Guys, I'm not really doing. I just like doing this. Like, I know I'm butchering it. This could be in. No, I won't do it.
Prussian dreams of a true parliamentary system, even a republic, are dashed. In December, two new players take the stage, who will play key roles in shaping the fate of Europe's revolutions. In Vienna, Emperor Ferdinand abdicates.
Oh, I was going to say Napoleon III, and no, that's not till later.
In favor of his 18-year-old nephew, Franz Joseph. He will reign until his death in 1916. In Paris, Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, nephew of Emperor Napoleon, is elected President of the French Republic.
There he is.
In a landslide victory. He promises to heal divisions, impose order, and restore France to her former glory.
The moderates feared the victory of the people more than that of the Bourbon troops. Francesco Crispi. Sicilian.
In Italy, the tumult continues into 1849. In the Papal States, the reforms of Pope Pius had seen him held up as an unlikely liberal role model. But escalating radicalism and violence, notably the assassination of his justice minister, Pellegrino Rossi, caused Pope Pius to flee Rome. In his absence, a Roman Republic is declared. It is led by Giuseppe Mazzini, the iconic figurehead of Italian nationalism, who's devoted his life to the unification of his homeland. But elsewhere, the Italian cause fares badly. Carlo Alberto resumes his war with Austria, with disastrous consequences. At the Battle of Novara, Radetzky inflicts another heavy defeat. Carlo Alberto abdicates in favor of his son, Vittorio Emanuele, to avoid a republican revolution. 12 years later, he'll become the first king of a modern united Italy. In the south, Ferdinand reverts to absolutist rule and sends troops to Sicily who stamp out the revolution. Then, to the dismay of liberals across Europe, French President Louis Napoleon sends troops to crush the Republic of Rome and put the Pope back on his throne. He has decided the support of French Catholics is more important to him than the fate of Italian Republicans. French forces are led by General Oudinot, son of the famous Marshal.
Oh, obviously it's not going to be... I keep forgetting. This is very far after the Napoleonic Wars. I'm like, oh, there he is.
Rome's defenders are led by Garibaldi.
I guess it's not that much. So 33 years? Okay.
But despite skilled and courageous resistance, Rome is forced to surrender after a 2-month siege. That summer, Radetzky also retakes Venice and puts an end to its republic.
This guy is unstoppable.
In March, the German National Parliament in Frankfurt had finally agreed on a constitution for a united Germany. It is to be a constitutional monarchy under an emperor. The man intended to play this role is Frederick William of Prussia. So when he declines the offer, the plan is killed stone dead. In public, he says it is impossible without the consent of the other German princes. In private, he says he would never accept a crown from the gutter, disgraced by the stink of revolution.
You see, I think there is this... I explained myself already. There's this shaking out of the dream of the past few hundred years. I've explained it. I'm going to go on forever.
Disgraced by the stink of revolution. Revolts in support of the national constitution break out in Saxony, the Palatinate, and the Grand Duchy of Baden. They are crushed by local forces, assisted by Prussian troops. The Frankfurt Parliament itself is dissolved. What hope there had been for a united Germany under a liberal constitution lies in ruins. In Austria, the new Emperor Franz Joseph issues his own new constitution.
How fresh their damn uniforms are.
Reclaiming almost all political power. He also revokes all the liberal reforms passed by the Hungarian parliament, known as the April Laws. In response, Lajos Kossuth declares formal Hungarian independence, and the country begins an extraordinary campaign of military mobilization. Hungarian commander General Gergely retakes Budapest. He then launches a bloody assault on Buda Castle, overpowering its Austrian garrison. In desperation, the Austrian emperor travels to Warsaw to formally request military aid from the Emperor of Russia. Russian troops have already moved into Moldavia and then Wallachia to put down the Romanian liberal revolution. Nicholas now agrees to send troops to Hungary to crush those he describes as the enemies of order and tranquility.
Doesn't the Crimean War happen like 3 years after this? And
Hungary faces an impossible strategic situation, surrounded and outnumbered more than 2 to 1. The combined onslaught is irresistible. The Hungarian forces are driven south and finally forced to surrender. In the aftermath, around 120 Hungarian politicians and army officers are executed. So ends Hungary's War of Independence.
we have been beaten and humiliated. The fate of European democracy has slipped from our hands. Pierre Joseph Proudhon, French socialist. Sorry.
1848 was a year like no other. A series of seismic political events.
That was one of the fastest 30 minutes ever.
Following one upon another like falling dominoes. But what had been achieved? A British historian famously described 1848 as the turning point at which modern history failed to turn.
Because I have ice. Just like with the Decembrist revolution, the Decembrist thing, and the Napoleonic Wars, what Napoleon did. You can't say it fails when clearly they were necessary for future revolutions. But then again, that means that a revolution can never fail, which obviously it can. And yet...
And for all the euphoria of Europe's springtime of the peoples, by 1849, it seemed that the counter-revolutionaries had won everywhere.
I've been looking for that damn picture for my background.
But some gains did endure, such as the abolition of serfdom in Austria and the popular vote in France, though France became a little less democratic in 1852, after Louis Napoleon made himself emperor. Across Europe, governments modernized and paid more attention to economic and social issues, partly in response to the new challenges that had emerged from socialist and working-class politics. The causes of German and Italian unification had been defeated, but made giant strides and learned crucial lessons. Their goals would not be achieved by ideas alone, but the realities of force.
Franco-Prussian.
In the words of Bismarck, the great questions of the day were to be settled not through speeches and majority decisions, but by iron and blood.
Who's this guy? Is that Moltke? Because that's Bismarck. So who's this guy?
It would be wars waged by powerful monarchies that united Germany and Italy. The legacy of 1848, for good and ill, would be felt for decades to come.
Suchet? Come on, Suchet. Berthier, okay, Wellington. Berthier, good. Davout, good. Lands, okay. Mira, good. Ney, amazing. After, let's be real. I like Suchet for a certain reason, but Ney is probably my favorite. Oudinot. All right, guys, check out their merch and everything. Use their link for the, what was it, Skillshare or something? Yeah, Skillshare. Really cool. I think that this is a big kind of eruption during a bigger... It just seems like Europe, as it's getting more modernized, and especially during the Industrial Revolution, where people are less constrained by the social norms of serfdom in some areas. Obviously, Russia is it's too far into there, but people start to wake up, and there's battle between people who hoping that it's more of a blip in history. Napoleonic Wars, the revolution of people trying to escape pure monarchies or close to pure, and fighting until you get to the point where monarchies are lessened in power until you have the sort of figureheads we have today, I guess. But yeah, it's cool seeing this. And how is this not connected to the Crimean War? I mean, it happened, like, if we're in the Crimean War, then the revolutions of 1848 happened like in 2018 or something like that, or 29. So I'm curious how that's not even really mentioned, and it's right after. So like something had to have been going on. Awesome video. Hope y'all learned something, or can teach me something, or can tell me when I was wrong or something. I hope you're all doing well, though. I really do. It's important. Mental health. If you're not, chin up. You'll be good soon. Don't worry. More videos coming. Trust me, guys. You'll be good. More videos coming. Bye.